Thanks for joining our call today for Weaving Shamanic Connection. Today, I will be talking about soul loss, when and why it happens, how it happens, what it means when it does happen, and then the process of soul retrieval, what a soul retrieval looks like, what it does, how it's done. And we won't be teaching soul retrieval today because it is an advanced process, and I need to be working with folks who I know are already really experienced with journeying and have a really powerful connection with their spirit guide or power animal. So we're not going to I'll walk through the process and I'll talk about it, but we're not going to do one today. But we will do a journey that's related. I'm not going to give too much detail yet about that because I'll get into that later. We are going to be doing a journey that is in regard to soul loss, and also give some tips and tricks on how to prevent soul loss in the future. And stay tuned to the end of the call, and I'm going to give an offer for folks in Weaving Shamanic Connection as well that hopefully you'll really like. So stay through to the end for that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and call in our guides and bring up that spirit circle. So settle in and close your eyes. Take a couple of nice, long, deep breaths, allowing those exhales to be twice as long as the inhale. And just coming present into the moment, releasing anything else on our minds about the morning, about the day. And imagine that opening in a field or meadow, circle of trees, however you see it, with a nice, safe bonfire in the middle. Connecting in with the spirit of fire, that power to transmute. And imagining the water flowing around in whatever way that comes to you. And connecting with water, that cleansing, light bringing ability of water. Connecting in your mind with that element. And as you stand on the earth around the fire and the water, feel down through your feet into the earth. Imagine that your heartbeat is beating at the same pulse, the same rate as Mother Earth. Connecting with that loving, nurturing energy, that balance and grounding that we all need. And imagine that you can feel a breeze circling around you, that nice, clean air, that life-giving air, and take a nice deep breath and fill your lungs with that energy of air as you connect in with that element. And now imagine that in the circle are everyone on this call, now and in the future, knowing in non-ordinary reality, there's no such thing as time. And so everyone present now and everyone present watching later is all in the circle together. Imagine sending out a welcome to everyone that's come, thanking them for bringing their presence, their gift of themselves into the circle. Sending them all your love and gratitude for being part of the community. And now imagine that you can feel each of those other people in the circle welcoming you. Thanking you for just showing up, for just being you exactly as you are in this moment. Feeling their love and appreciation and their gratitude for you and your energy that you bring to the circle today. Good. Now call in any of your guides, helpers, angels, ancestors, compassionate spirits to join you in the circle. We ask Spirit to help us form a loving and supportive community. We ask for guidance and support in building connection with one another and with our spirit guides. We ask for help creating open and clear communication with our spirit helpers so that we can be guided to live our best lives for our own highest good and the highest good of all those lives that we touch. Now I'll offer gratitude for all of those spirit guides, helpers, angels and ancestors, compassionate spirits who have come into the circle, those that we know and those that we do not. Good. And now offer gratitude to yourself for being here, appreciating your own energy, your own contribution to the community. And knowing that anytime, if you like, even when you're not here in the circle, you can always return to this place. Knowing that each time we do this, each time that any of us comes to this place, whether we're doing it in community on a call or individually on our own, we add to the energy and the power of this place. It's a place that we can all come to feel supported, to feel connection, to feel community. Good. And now take a deep breath and return yourself to ordinary reality. When you're ready, open your eyes and return to the here and now in the call. Thank you for that. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about soul retrieval and soul loss and the way that that's been dealt with historically and still going on in shamanic communities where that's practiced on a community level. So soul loss has been something that has really been in every shamanic tradition, past and present. It's something that has been recognized as one of the core reasons of why people get sick. And so when it's done traditionally, it's been done in a way where, because it's been done historically and in those shamanic traditions that are still happening, in a way where soul loss is understood and taught from birth. People and children are taught about that. Whenever there's a trauma, whenever there's an event where soul loss happens, and I'll talk a little bit more in a little bit about what that looks like and how that happens. But traditionally, when that's happened, it's usually around 3 days. That's been the sort of the magic number that's been practiced in all the shamanic traditions that have been researched, that have been known, that are still happening today. An event happens, a trauma, and then 3 days later, the community comes together along with the shaman, and that soul is called back into the body. So there's a little bit of time of processing, of grieving, of dealing with kind of the psychological process of the trauma. And then after 3 days, they bring that soul energy back home. And the shaman is the one who does it, but the community comes together as a whole to welcome that soul part back. And so that is an important part. So again, this is why we build this community on Weaving Shamanic Connections, and with being in the call together as much as possible, and just connecting with one another, is because historically community has really been a strong part of that. And soul retrieval is much more powerful when it's done in a community setting, when there's more than just the one person to welcome that soul part home. And again, in a little bit, we'll talk about what that looks like. And it can be an emotional process. And in the days and weeks after, memories and things can come up. And so again, that's when people have community to rely on, when we have folks who understand what we're going through. If we go around telling all of our friends and family of today that we're having a soul retrieval, they may think that that's just craziness, and they may not be that supportive community that we need. So having folks who understand what the process looks like, and what you may be going through, and to be there to help support you can be an important part of the process. And I say can be because sometimes that's just not possible. Sometimes there's folks that just don't have that, and it doesn't mean that it can't be done. But it's always been done sort of 3 days after the process. So that's been part of it historically. So what is soul loss? Soul loss is when a little part of ourselves splits off, a little part of our energy, a little part of our soul. I kind of have put this in the context, maybe it makes it a little scarier than it should be, but anyone who's read Harry Potter and is familiar with the Horcruxes and little bits of Voldemort's soul being put into different objects. So that's similar, not obviously exactly how it's done. He did it intentionally. Usually it's not done intentionally. There's zero reason to do that intentionally. But we'll have a trauma. We'll have something that's upsetting, oftentimes in childhood, although it definitely can happen in it as adults as well. But in childhood, when we have those times, it can be really scary, really emotional. And just children, we don't understand a lot of what's going on around us. And when we get scared, when we get upset, when we get angry, we don't know where to put that. It feels too big for us to handle. The soul will split off a little part of itself. That is a survival mechanism. So it's not done, with any kind of malice. It's done as a survival mechanism. And so when you think about it in psychological terms, when we look at trauma and the mind and how things work with trauma, there's what's called a disassociation. There's that little part of us that when abuse is happening, when something too big to handle is happening, there's a little part of our mind that disassociates, that goes somewhere else. And so even in psychology, they do understand and recognize that this happens. They just don't necessarily bring in the energetic piece of it. They just know that there's a little part of the mind that shuts down, that goes somewhere else. But a lot of in psychology today, they're not really recognizing the energetic piece of that. So that's kind of a part of what it's really inner child work. It's wounded child work, and there's both an emotional and a energetic process that happens. So those pieces of us, they're still connected. We can never really get totally rid of our soul. They're always still connected. But in psychological terms, when trauma happens, there's an understanding that little piece of ourself that disassociates, that's traumatized, tends to stay the age and the maturity of that, the age and the date of the trauma. So if you had something happen when you were 5 years old, that little piece of your psyche is going to remain 5 years old. And until it's processed, as far as, again, in psychological terms, until it's processed, it's going to stay the maturity of a 5-year-old, which is why you have adult people being triggered into anger that they know or may not know, they may or may not recognize is not appropriate for the situation. And we've all had that. We've had times where we're like, why am I angry like this? Why am I blowing up at this person? Why am I, even if we're able to hold it in, why am I feeling angry, upset, jealous, sad, scared in situations that don't necessarily relate? They don't deserve that level of emotion. That's because, again, on the psychological level, that's that piece of our psyche that hasn't really matured or developed. It's still stuck in the cycle of that wounded child. And so the same thing is true for the soul. That little part that goes away, it can be stuck in the lower world. It can be stuck in the upper world. It can be stuck in the middle world. It goes off to wherever it goes off to. And it's still replaying that. Depending on where it goes, it might be it might look a little bit different. When it goes into the upper world, sometimes people have that ethereal feeling, that part of themselves that feels, well, no matter where you go, there's a part of you that's going to feel disconnected. And I'll talk a little bit about what soul loss, the impact of it. But if you go to the upper world, if your soul part goes to the upper world, it tends to be that airy feeling, that sort of disconnect that people feel. Gosh, I just can't focus. I just can't ground myself. I just, when I'm trying to pay attention to a meeting at work, I'm off in la la land. That's often when a soul part has gone to the upper world, it brings us out of our bodies in a way that feels kind of, I don't know, airy fairy for a lack of a better word, just sort of disconnected in a way that feels we're in the upper world. It's in the upper world, in the place where things are generally good, but also disconnected. Am I making sense? I feel like I'm lacking the right words that I'm looking for right now, but you get the idea, hopefully. So then if it goes into the lower world, sometimes also that can be, with power animals, it can be sometimes overly grounded. That's sometimes where we feel really tired, really grounded in an overly grounded way that can be tired, fatigued, where your body just feels heavy. It's hard to lift yourself up and go anywhere and do anything because your part of yourself is in the lower world. And then in the middle world, that's where people tend to get stuck in the actual event. So there's part of them that is in that room where that happened, and the argument with the parents are still happening or whatever. You're stuck in that loop of the actual middle world event happening. And so that little kid is hiding under the table, covering their ears, rocking back and forth, trying to feel better about their parents arguing or whatever the situation is. So anyway, around it, none of them are more healthy than the other. They just can have different impacts on how that soul loss affects us. But anyway, around it, again, it's still part of our soul, but we're still connected, but there's a little bit of our energy that's feeding that part, right? Because it is connected, it's part of us, it's part of our energy system, but we're feeding our energy off to that place. And so it can be draining for us in the here and now, because we're basically taking care of a soul part that is no longer integrated and that's no longer feeding us as a whole person. And so it's draining of our energy. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions so far? Okay. So in shamanic practice, the job is to bring that soul part home, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I want to just talk about some of the symptoms of soul loss, which basically is everything. There's really no limit to the way soul loss can impact people. Again, I've already mentioned feeling drained, feeling, heavy and lack of energy. And that can sometimes relate to feelings of depression, feeling of despondency. We can also feel that sort of ADD, that inability to focus, to be in the here and now. As much as you keep trying, you just always float off somewhere else. Then there's, depression, anxiety, addiction, lack of energy, lack of enthusiasm and numbed out. That can also be the grounding, and or in the middle world, sometimes that soul part that's still replaying that trauma. We've had to shut ourselves down from that. And so it can feel like numbed out, lack of enthusiasm, just always wanting to, or not being in the middle of something that you love doing and not being able to muster up that feeling of joy and enjoyment of what you're doing. And it can also have the converse of that, feeling overstimulated, feeling like everything is too much, too loud. And maybe you use substances to kind of numb out or quiet things. Maybe you need to be alone more often than maybe is even healthy. Those kind of just drawing inside because things can be overstimulated. Spaced out, that's another one that can also be related to that upper world where you're just feeling like you can't stay focused. And then physical illness is a big one. So a lot of energy practices, not only shamanism, but other things like Reiki and other practices that deal with energy, recognize the idea that that illness often starts on an energy level first. So first there's something psychological or emotional, something happens to us, or something traumatic, something we don't like, something we can't deal with. And then there's an energetic, either, soul loss or an intrusion, other things that can happen with our energy. And then that energy, if it's not fixed, if it's not healed, if it's not dealt with in a healthy way, then eventually it settles into the body and it can become physical illness. So physical illness can also be definitely related to soul loss. And in fact, like I mentioned, historically, pretty much all illness was dealt with it as a spiritual loss or an intrusion. They dealt with it shamanically. They dealt with it by going out and finding that soul part or finding the intrusion, finding out what's going on an energy level. And that's how they dealt with physical illness, not necessarily. Of course, there was also herbal and plant healing and things like that, but even those were seen as an integrated whole part of that shamanic practice, where even the plants and herbs and things that were helping the healing process, the energy of the plant was asked permission, was told what the intention is, and taken in intentionally for the person to continue that healing, whilst also bringing in the energy of dealing with the energy loss or the soul loss of the body. Another big piece of soul retrieval or symptom of a soul loss that I see when dealing with soul retrievals in today's world is really a feeling of yearning for the self. I get that all the time with clients. They just feel a piece of them is missing. They feel like they just don't feel whole. They don't feel like they know themselves. They feel like they're searching for something. And sometimes they have an idea of what that thing is, and sometimes they don't, but there's just that yearning feeling that something's missing. So I feel like that's a really common one that we all feel, or many, many people feel on a large scale. Repeating emotions are also a symptom of soul loss. And by that, I mean, I should say repeating inappropriate emotions. So again, those times where you have hair trigger anger and you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be getting angry all the time, but little things set you off. Or it can be the reverse. It can be depression, which is anger turned inward on the self. So little things set you off into negative self-talk, into self-blame, into self-shame, and all of those things go inside. And then, and even when consciously, on a self-awareness level, on a maturity level, this isn't something to be upset about. This isn't something I did. This isn't my fault. There's nothing, but you just can't shake that feeling of having done something wrong. So, and then a very, very extreme version of soul loss is coma. And that's when we sometimes even in the medical world, they recognize sometimes that there's soul loss there, that the body is there and the functions of the body are still happening, but there's something missing on the inside. There's no medical reason that they can understand why the person isn't waking up. And that's soul loss. That's kind of the most extreme version of soul loss. So any questions so far? Okay.
So do you think that the same could be said for like Alzheimer's or that kind of condition and like towards the end of life?
That's a good question. I feel like, I can't really say for sure on a like absolute level. I think everybody, even when it's the same disease, I think we can come at it individually for individual reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, so yeah, I would have to journey for the individual person, and I've never journeyed on Alzheimer's. So that's a good question. You can journey on that and
Yeah.
but my just gut feeling, my intuition says that, over time, especially when we get older, because in our culture, we're not taught at all to deal with energy and healing illness and healing our bodies on an energy level. I would say that over time, you've had soul loss after soul loss after soul loss, as well as intrusions, as well as whatever else is going on for that individual person. And eventually it's taken in, like you said, as a physical illness. So it's possible. It's possible that that's one of the results of ongoing soul loss and other energetic problems without being dealt with.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Sure, yeah. So as far as what happens to create soul loss, like I said, it's trauma. It's anything that it can be small to large things. I've heard of people having soul loss over walking into a door and hitting their head and just getting really angry at the moment, like anything that takes us out of the moment. Shamanic cultures that are still happening today, which I should preface this by saying I haven't studied with them any of them personally. However, I have studied with many people who have lived amongst and studied with traditional shamanic cultures that are still going on today. They think that we are crazy for having alarm clocks. They think that every time an alarm takes you out of sleep in a way that is startling, that in a way that like moves you from the dream time into ordinary reality like that, in a way that is shocking, that there's a little bit of soul loss that happens. So it can truly be really small things. However, usually it's big stuff. It's the stuff that we know of from our childhood or even our adult lives, when we've been in situations that were scary, that were where we didn't have a sense of control or understanding of what was happening. As children, that's all the time, right? We as children, we basically don't have control very rarely. Not for much that goes on around us or to us. And so there can be a lot of soul loss when there's emotions and things happening that are that we don't understand, that we can't control. And I don't want to make it sound like every time anything scary happened as a child there was soul loss. It depends on how things are dealt with. If you had supportive parents, if you had folks that were able to notice that something is happening, and talk to you and ask you what's going on and help you feel better, that soul might not have needed to go away. It's more the times where the soul is feeling, where emotionally we're feeling something so intense that's not getting better and there's no way to control it, that we need, like, again, I said, it's a coping mechanism. There's part of our survival that wants to put this part away, that part that's feeling so bad that it just can't handle it for another moment. And so it goes somewhere else, so that it can be, so that you can maintain your here and now and you can go on with your daily life without feeling those same feelings all the time. Another way that we lose soul is through what's called soul theft. That sounds scarier than it usually is. And also it's usually, actually, I should say it sounds more malicious than it usually is. Soul theft can happen in the most loving and caring ways. A common way that we lose soul, or that soul theft happens, is through parenting. Also through partnership. So we can have parents that just love us so dang much. They just want to hold right on, and they do. And they don't realize they're doing it. Again, in our culture, we're not taught these things. So parents who just love on their child so very, very much can take a little piece of that child and be holding their part of their energy, part of their essence. And so there can be soul theft happening, especially as children. We don't have any barriers and, protections. Even as adults, even when we're not trained to have barriers and protections, we still tend to intuit some of that on some level, even when we're not aware of it. But as children, we just don't have that. So it can happen through usually unintentional. Very few people are trained on how to steal part of a soul. So, it's almost always unintentional. It can also be, like I said, through partnership. You have a relationship that you just love that person so, so much. And a lot of times it can be fear-based. We're afraid that person is going to leave us, and what would life be like? And I just love them so much. And so we steal a little piece of their essence in order to sort of feel better and calm ourselves against that idea of them potentially going away. And then, there's also the breakup. There's times where someone has left you and it's traumatic and you're grieving and you don't want that person to go away. It wasn't a mutual breakup. And so again, you're stealing a piece of that essence so that you still have them with you and they can't go away. I'm really sorry, you guys, but my dog's at the door scratching to go out. So give me 1 second to open the door. Sorry about that. I do my best to try and walk them and take care of them, make sure that they don't need anything for this 1 hour of a call. But apparently that wasn't a long enough walk this morning. So anyway, so we ourselves can have stolen energy from others, and we can have had that stolen from us. Even with the very best of intentions, it doesn't make us bad people. It just makes us folks who aren't aware of the process and what's happening. So that is what we're going to journey on later, is to check in to see if we have stolen anyone else's essence, and I'll walk you through the process of returning that. And if your answer is no, so we'll check in with spirit. And if the answer is no, that you aren't holding on to anyone's essence, then you can use that time just to ask your guide if a soul retrieval is something that would be beneficial for you. Or if that doesn't feel right, you can ask your guide whatever you want. But that's what we're going to focus on today, are those things. Either if it's yes, that you have someone's essence, we'll release that back to them. And again, if it's a no, then you'll just maybe ask if soul retrieval is something for you. So then the other thing that I'm not going to get into too much, because it's a whole nother animal, but a way that we can lose part of our soul energy is through banishing our own shadow. And so the way that happens is, as children, usually, I would say almost always, I've never worked with anyone or heard of anyone that this happened as an adult, but I suppose it's possible. There can be times where we shut down our piece of ourselves and banish it. We send it away. It's just too much. If you've had parents that told you were, anything, whatever it is, too big for your britches, calm down, you're too energetic, you're too emotional, you're too fill in the blank. That's told you enough that there's enough shame and blame in that part of ourselves that we sent that away. And that is not a soul retrieval process. It's what's called a shadow retrieval process, which looks a little bit different, mainly in that the integration is much longer and more intense, because you've sent that part away conscientiously. I'll just get into a little bit because you've sent that part away, that part's not real happy with you. So all soul retrieval has some integration process, something that requires us to do some work around the integration and being mindful and other things. But with the shadow self, that part isn't just traumatized by someone else ready to come back and be part of the whole. That part is pissed off. It's angry. You've sent it away. You've shamed it. You've blamed it. You've caged it, and usually in a really unpleasant place. And it takes more integration work, because you need to get that part on board and move it from that angry self into an ally self, into a part of yourself that's ready to come home, that trusts you again. So I'm not going to talk about that too much today, because that's a whole nother animal. But as far as soul retrieval, which is the part bringing any of those parts back, whether they've been stolen by another person or whether they've been split off through trauma, it's considered an advanced process. Like I said earlier, it requires a lot of understanding of journeying and practice and experience with journeying, and a really strong connection with your helping spirit or your power animal. And so that's why it's advanced. It's something that I think anyone can learn to do. And I can even teach that if that feels like something people want to do down the line, but I definitely would need a little more communication and kind of maybe being more active on the posts and things like that. And I just need to know that people are having those experiences, and they are going out and journeying, and they are getting connected with their spirit guide. And then we can move forward with that. If that's something that people want in the group, ping me and let me know, and we'll talk about that. But basically, it's just a journey that the shamanic practitioner does. Like with always, there needs to be focus and intention. So we set a strong intention for the client for whatever they need. So with soul retrieval, usually there are multiple parts that are brought back in one time. It's often not one soul part. It's usually a cluster of soul parts that are related to the goal of the client. So, for example, if a client comes in and says that they have anxiety, and they've just had it from this certain age, and here's how it shows up in their lives, and we'll talk about those sorts of things. And then the intention that I would set, as if I'm doing the soul retrieval for this person, is that to retrieve all of the soul parts that are related to this person's anxiety. So there might be other soul parts that are lost around other things that have created other symptoms in their lives potentially, but we can't do them all at once because it's overwhelming. We don't want to bring back too many soul parts all at one time. Generally, the kind of consensus is that 3 is the right number, or the maximum number. Every now and then, another one will want to pop in, and I'll check in with my power animal to see if it's appropriate to do more than the 3. And if I get a yes, then I will. But usually it's 1, 2, or 3 that come back in that one soul retrieval. And then the others can be done again. It's just something that needs to be done over time. You need to work with one integration first. And then normally there's a requirement, again, the general consensus is to wait at least 6 months between doing one soul retrieval and the next. And that's just because, again, we want to integrate those parts. So the journey looks like setting that intention, asking spirit helper to find all of those places where the soul parts have gone. And then you see it as I see it might be different for others, but I see it as these threads, these cords that come out from the person, and they go in whatever direction. And I follow them. So I might follow 1 to the upper world. I might follow 2 to the upper world. 1 might be middle world, lower world. 1 might turn out to be, in the middle world, but still connected to a person. That's the soul theft is a middle world journey. Actually, that's not 100% true. I will say, when I had a soul retrieval done for me before I started any practicing or learning about shamanism myself, and in that process, one of my soul parts was in the upper world, and it was actually soul theft because my mother passed on when I was 9, and it was a sudden, unexpected death. It wasn't an illness or anything. She just died. And when she took a piece of my soul with her. So that was both soul theft and upper world part of my soul. So, different things can happen. It's always an interesting process. It's always unexpected and unpredictable. But I'll follow those parts to each of their places. And so, for example, if I go to the upper world, then I'll get that soul part back, and I'll usually just hold hands with it, and then bring it back. And then go to the next cord and where the other cord is. So I'm still holding on to each of those parts. So I gather a cluster of these guys. If the soul part is too much to hold on to, which doesn't happen very often, but every now and then the soul part is a little bit frenzied. They can be excited, they can be scared, they can be whatever. Then I'll use a soul catcher. And for me, and for what's really common is a soul catcher is a crystal. And I bring a crystal that I have both in ordinary reality, and then I bring it with me in non-ordinary reality, which means I'm just imagining it and holding it in my mind there, and putting the intention of putting the spirit into the soul catcher. So some people do that the entire time. They put each part into the soul catcher. Then you bring those parts back, and you blow them I take them into my heart, and then I blow them into the heart and the forehead, the top of the head, the crown of the person. If I'm not doing it in person, which really I don't do in person unless things change at all right now, because I'm not going to blow. Even if I'm masked, I'm not going to blow air around someone's, face, even if we're both masked because of COVID. So in that case, I would blow it in the middle world. So I'm going to that person, the client, in finding them in the middle world and blowing it into their middle world heart and their middle world crown, which is the same thing. It's putting it, while it's doing it in the middle world, it's also doing it for them physically. A lot of practitioners do remote healing and remote retrievals, and that's how they do it, is in the middle world. Is there any questions on any of that so far? Okay. So a couple of caveats on what that might look like. Like I said, it's really different for each person. But when I go to talk to the soul, sometimes, so it starts out with an introduction. And so I have a picture of the person in my mind, and I'll introduce them, I'll find them. I notice that they're a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, whatever. And it'll look like that person when they're that age. And I'll just introduce myself. I'm Nicole. I'm here on XYZ's behalf. And I'll just say Jane. I'm here on Jane's behalf. And here's Jane. And I'll show a picture of Jane from my mind. Usually I'm holding a picture. Again, this is in the imaginal realm. So I'm showing them a picture of Jane. This is Jane. She's your adult self. She's really excited for you to come home. She's just found out that you're out here, and she loves you. She supports you. So there's some amount of negotiation and explaining the situation. I want to make sure that that soul part knows that they're coming back to a safe place, and that whatever it was that happened that sent them away is no longer happening. And so sometimes I'll find that soul part still experiencing the abuse. In that case, I will only describe the abuse to the person when I'm talking to the client, again, after it's done and I'm telling them what I experienced in the journey. If the client has not expressed any understanding or memory of the abuse, I will not tell them that. It's considered unethical as far as shamanic ethics go. If someone knows that they were abused, it's okay to say, I saw that person, they were still having XYZ happen. And, but if someone is just unaware, if they have not expressed awareness, then I'll just let them know this person was dealing with an abusive situation back when you were 3. Are you aware of that, of a situation that happened when you were 3? If they say no, then I'll just say, then that's as far as I'll go with it. It's just, the soul part that's what was happening for them, but I've explained to them that that's no longer happening in your life and it's safe and whatnot. In situations like that, the person can remember the abuse because the soul integration. So that soul part has that memory, and it's not uncommon for that person in the days or weeks, usually a few days afterwards, to suddenly remember an abuse that has not happened, which is really why it's important to do a lot of integration work, and as a practitioner to be there for the client, to process these things when they come back, and I'll talk a little bit about my integration process and how mine differs a little from traditional down the road. That's kind of the process with that. Now, if it's a soul theft, then there has to be convincing of that person who's stolen the essence. And that person often doesn't know that they have that person. We're dealing with that person in the middle world. So we are not dealing with their here and now ordinary reality. In non-ordinary reality, that part of them recognizes that they're holding on to someone else. So they may not know it consciously in the here and now, but that middle world part of them does know that they're holding on to their daughter or their partner or something. Usually it's just a matter of convincing them that you can't actually do anything with anyone else's essence. There's absolutely nothing that we can do. It actually drains us. So if I'm holding on to someone else's energy, it takes my energy to hold that energy, and I get nothing from it. I cannot integrate it. I cannot use it. I cannot draw from it. But we often think that we can, that middle world self thinks that it can. So it's often just a matter of explaining that you can't do anything with this energy. It doesn't help you, and it actually takes energy of yours in order to contain it. And so usually that's enough, not always. Sometimes I can't do the convincing, and I ask my guides to talk, and they'll do it. I've never had this happen, but I know that some shamanic practitioners have had the part just be so unwilling to let go that they have to resort to tricking them into it. Which is usually, this sounds so crazy. It sounds like a cartoon, but like you just fill a ball with energy. You ask your spirit guide, not our energy. We don't want to confuse that into the process, but you have your spirit guide put in their energy, bring in universal energies, create a ball of energy. And it's literally like, see this shiny bauble? If you let go of that shiny bauble, I will give you this shiny bauble, which I haven't had to do yet. But that's one way that we can get people to let go of the energy sometimes and trick them into it. So and usually it's explained afterwards. Once we have that, that soul part goes into, usually in that case, a soul catcher, just so that they're safe and they're no longer visible, and they're no longer a shiny bauble that the other person can see. And we'll just let them know, hey, that this is what's happened. You can hold on to that universal energy that I just gave you. That is something that you can actually integrate if you want. But, this energy wasn't getting you anywhere, and it was actually draining you. So then there's usually explanation. Some people leave it just with the trick and then just ask their spirit guides to handle it. Like, this mess over here that's been created, I call in their spirit guides to help them deal with it in whatever way that's possible, or that's appropriate. So any questions on any of that so far? Okay. Let's see. think, yeah, I've gone over most of that process. So I'll talk a little bit about life after soul retrieval and the integration process. And I'll describe first what the general process looks like and then how I differ from that. And there's no right or wrong way. With shamanism, there are no rules. It's just following your spirit guide and trusting them and knowing that they know what is best. They have a bigger perspective and understanding than we do. And this is in no way to disparage the general way of doing it. Just also there's just two different ways. I do mine a little different than the general way, but everybody has little nuances that they do that's different, because when you're learning soul retrieval, the very first thing that you do is do a journey to your spirit guides to ask what is the right process for you to be a practitioner of soul retrieval. So everyone's answer is going to be a little bit different, whether you use a crystal, whether you use a different kind of soul catcher, whether you don't use a soul catcher, whether, yeah, all different kinds of ways of doing it. So um, that's my long caveat for that. So as far as the general way, and again, this is the way through Michael Harner and who taught Sandra Ingerman, who those two have really made core shamanism one of the more popular ways that are being taught. There are others that I don't know. So this is just the practice of core shamanism. Is that, again, if there's a possible way to have community with the person, that's the best way to do it, even if it's just bringing one person into the session. And even if you're doing it virtually, you can do that, if you're doing it at the same time. And by that, I mean, there's some practitioners that just do it on their own. Like, I will tell you when I've done it and they send you a recording of the soul retrieval, but you don't have to be even aware. They do it in their own time, in their own way, and then they just let you know that it's done. So that's one way of doing it. But if practitioners that work with the person at the same time, so even if it's, again, virtually, at least you know that at 3 o'clock on Sunday, in whatever time zone, we're going to be doing this at the same time. And I'll do it where I'm at, and you are where you're at. And maybe we have a virtual connection on Zoom, maybe not. But at least you have community there. And traditionally, one of the things that people would do is they'd let the shaman would let the soul part know who's waiting for them. And so not just the person, the individual, but their parents, that person's parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, community, and they would list all of these people to let that soul part know this is who wants you back, which is just such a beautiful practice. And I feel that we are sadly lacking in that in our society. What an amazing thing it would be to still have that. If people have that available, that can be done. So the people are all waiting there to celebrate when the soul part is returned, and also to support that person through what happens afterwards. So like I said, memories and feelings and emotions can bubble up from the time of that soul. So that's something that the person needs to at very least be aware of, and should be invited, in my opinion, to call and still work with the shamanic practitioner afterwards. So it shouldn't be done, in my opinion, as a one-off, like, I did this for you, you go away. If you want any more processing, you need to either call someone else or pay me more money. In my opinion, it should be done as one whole process, and that person should be supported as long as is needed. If you've committed yourself to a healing practice, I believe that you should be committed at that level. And generally, that's how core shamanism agrees with that process. So usually there's a process, a phone call or a Zoom or an in-person or whatever afterwards. So if it's generally about a week or so, you do the shamanic or the soul retrieval, and then a week later, there's an actual appointment to touch base with them, to see what they need, to see what's going on, to see if there's anything else happening, because there are other things can pop up. Sometimes it's so unpredictable with these things. It can turn out that there's another soul part that's just, the person keeps dreaming of a soul part that's still out there, or it can be anything, and the shamanic practitioner may need to go back into that realm and find out what's going on and what else is needed. So but sometimes when the post retrieval, besides the memories and feelings that can pop up. Some really amazing things can happen right away. People often report feeling more energetic, feelings of wholeness, feelings of like inner strength, and like I just feel like I'm myself. And in ways that they can't even describe. There's often feelings of playfulness and joyfulness, those parts of childhood that got split off, the beneficial parts of childhood that we get split off and then we don't always recognize as adults. Um, there's obviously a reduction and or elimination of all the symptoms that the person came in with. So if it was anxiety, depression, whatever that soul retrieval was being done for, often there'll be sometimes just a slow reduction and sometimes they're just gone depending on the situation. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes people don't feel anything, and that's also a possibility. Um, that can be for two reasons. Either the person, um, the energy that was brought back is so subtle that there just aren't huge outward shifts. And by outward, I mean like anxiety, depression, those kinds of things that are really obvious, or illness that are really obvious to us. It may not be, it may be that what was brought back was just more subtle things that aren't as obvious. And so they may just not notice any difference. Another reason people might not notice a difference is because they're not ready for the soul part. So sometimes there's a part of them that just doesn't really want the integration, isn't ready to deal with it. Maybe it hits those things start to hit their memory a little bit and they just send it right off again. The psyche goes, no, I'm not going there. And it just sends it right back off again. So those are some reasons why people may not feel anything. I find that to be a lot less common, that people don't feel anything, but it can happen. So having said all that with my process, some of you may have been through it already, but I have a whole, I integrate both the soul retrieval with the psychological element, the emotional element of it, because I feel that it's best done with those two. When we can do it with a really intentional integration and deal with the emotional piece of it, then it avoids those folks who either the soul part pops right back out again, or it's just so subtle that they don't notice it. So what I do is I work with hypnosis and bring the person into a trance state. And then we start with what is a hypnosis process dealing with the emotion of it. So we find the symptoms and feelings that they're experiencing today, and we let those things pull that person back to the original or very early time in their lives when that was happening. And basically, that's the part where the soul split off. So we're going back into that event and we're reframing that event. So we're having it turn into something fun, and people bring in their adult self into that time in non-ordinary reality. So the child self is there, the adult self is there. The adult self is giving love and support. The child gets to feel loved and supported and know that they're not alone now. And they get to move through that scene in a way that's fun. And so the adult self will bring in whatever they want. We can have balloon animals come and run them out of the room. I've had actually lots of people lately doing dance parties. I don't know why that's a theme recently. But where they'll have like rock stars show up and they're singing and they're dancing, and whatever else is going on is like just so, just it's background noise. I don't even notice it. And so what it does is it changes the emotional template. They get to have that same scene happen, but it's processed in a way where they're laughing and they're dancing and they're having fun. And on a subconscious level, it doesn't change the actual memory. We can still subconsciously remember what happened, actually happened, but we've changed the emotional template. So now when we do go back and remember it, we remember dance party fun, while also, like I said, remembering what actually did happen. The emotional template has changed. So that sets the stage for bringing that soul part back into healthy emotions. It discharges some of the emotions that soul part was feeling. And it also brings in some trust. It starts to build a bridge between adult self and child self, where that soul part realizes, hey, my adult self was there with me and had this whole fun experience for me and has my back and is trustworthy and safe. So then I bring in, there's also a power animal involved or guide usually. Yeah, it could be either or, power animal or a spirit helper. they bring that part to a healing space. And so that kind of ends part one of that soul retrieval. We've reframed the emotion. We've brought the soul part to a safe and healing place where the power animal will remain with them. The client then has homework to go visit them every day for about a week, for a while each day. So they go and they visit that healing place. They get to play with that little kid. They get to love on that kid. And again, it's setting up that understanding of that soul part, that things are safe now, and that this person that is the adult is actually pretty fun and cool and really cares about them and supports them. So then the part two, the next session, is bringing that all back in and integrating. So we make sure that the soul part does feel loved, does feel supported, does feel protected, does want to come back and is ready to come back. And the adult self feels the same way, ready for all of this to be processed. Like I said, the emotional discharges happen so that it's feels better. So we're not bringing in a part that's going to bring in a lot of trauma. And then we do a ceremony around that, and again, bringing in power animal, getting messages from spirit, getting messages from the little kid, releasing anything that still needs to be released, and we integrate that soul part in a way that feels healthy and moving forward. So that's kind of my way of doing soul retrieval. Having said that, I do also still do the traditional soul retrieval for folks, where I just go out into the spirit world and bring the spirit part back, and I can do soul retrieval that way as well, just depending on kind of where the person's at. Some people don't need that whole psychological element. They've processed it. They've been in talk therapy for years. They know exactly where it comes from. They feel ready and good about bringing it back in, and hearing the difference between the two. They just want the soul retrieval piece of it, which I can do as well. Any questions or comments on any of that so far? Okay. So let's see. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Oh, another question that I come up with, I think I might have already answered, is I talked about how that we can have multiple sort of clusters of soul parts. And so you might have soul parts that are related to anxiety, or soul parts that are related to not being able to motivate yourself, or feeling tired and non-energetic. So it depends on what your goal is. We kind of take a look at the intention and then go for the soul parts, which I said are usually no more than 3. And then you want to wait at least 6 months for that next one to work on the next thing. So how often does that need to be done? Because when we think back of all the many traumas in childhood and all the ways that we may have split off, there may be many, 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 there may be even hundreds of soul parts of us out there. However, people that have been doing this a heck of a lot longer than I have, and the many, many, many teachers out there that have come together and talked about experiences, the general consensus is that usually you only need a few soul retrievals in your life. So maybe 3, 4 total. Oftentimes 3 is kind of the place where people feel, you just feel whole. It's hard to really explain, and there's no real understanding that I'm aware of why that is. But we don't need to go back and find literally every 100 little parts of ourselves. My theory is that once we get those really impactful, the really core pieces that are causing big parts, big disruptions in our lives, once those parts are back, I think that they magnetize those other parts back. It's like, I'm safe, I'm healthy, my energy is back, it's here. Like, instead of being spread out all over, we kind of have this core essence. And it's just like those parts are like little fireflies coming back to the light. They're just like, okay, I'm that light is part of my light, and it just attracts it home. That's my theory. I don't know what other people think on that one, honestly, but yeah, that's just, it's not something that you need to worry about doing again and again and again, because of all the memories you can think of that probably cause soul loss. You can just do usually 2, or anywhere from 2 to 3 times, maybe 4 max, but each one of those is going to bring, like I said, 1 to 3 core pieces back. And I always feel like 3 is the magic number for some reason. That, if we do if we do a different soul retrieval 3 times and bring 1 to 3 parts back each of those times, that just tends to be enough to let people be healthy and strong in themselves and not really feeling any results of soul loss anymore. Any questions on that? All right. Ways of avoiding soul loss. So we can really just having a resilient heart and mind is the best medicine for avoiding soul loss, because like I said, we can still, it's not all in childhood, we can still lose that as adults from alarm clocks and anything else. But if you're really just working on self-awareness, that's one of the core practices. So I would say meditation and mindfulness are some of the core practices of having that resilient mind and that resilient heart. Because you'll notice that I just hit my head on a door walking out and I'm getting really, really angry. And you can call yourself back and be like, okay, that was a goofy thing to do, but I'm going to just take a deep breath and let it go, instead of letting that trauma like build and then parts of your essence goes away. So meditation, mindfulness, working with your power animals. If you ever feel like you are in a moment where you can't control the emotion that's happening, like let's say you're in a car accident, that's very, very scary. Your pulse is racing, you're having fight or flight reactions. You can't necessarily just say, I'm going to be calm in this moment. And, in those cases, you can call your power animal with you and ask, I feel like I'm having a lot of strong emotion right now. I want to make sure that I don't have any soul loss. Please make sure that I don't. And they will do that for you. You can, if you have a power song, which we will be, if people want, we can be doing journeys for power songs in the future. Power songs can sing your soul back in or sing yourself whole again. So in those moments where there's been something really traumatic, like a car accident, a power song is a way of keeping that energy with you and calling it home. So before it leaves, and kind of calling it home while it's just on the verge of leaving, but hasn't quite done that yet. So those are a few things. And then really just like I talked about in the video about being connected with nature, the more that we connect in with nature, the more that we are in rhythm with nature, the more we feel that sense of self, that sense of groundedness. And those things build a resilient mind and a resilient heart, which make it harder for things to jar us out of our souls. So any questions on any of that? Okay, so I'm going to go close my door now because I'm going to start drumming. I don't want to bug my neighbors, and then we'll get into a journey. All right, thank you for your patience and the zooming at home and all of the things that come with that. So keep my drum here. So today's journey is going to be, like I said, we're going to ask if we have stolen anyone's energy. So that'll be part one, is setting an intention to call in our spirit guides and asking the question if we have soul energy from anyone else. If you receive a yes, then you'll follow along with the rest of the journey. If you receive a no, then just go ahead and ask your spirit guide if it seems like a soul retrieval is something that's appropriate for you. If you want, you don't have to ask that. You can ask anything else. You can just hang out with your soul or with your power animal and just ask them to show you a middle world, upper world. Ask them a question, some other question that you have in mind. At that point, the journey's yours. Just do whatever you want with it, and just stop listening to me until you hear the change in drumming to call you back. Otherwise, if you get a yes, then we'll be walking through the process of returning that soul to you. So I'll just say we are going to be using a soul catcher. We're going to be using a crystal. If you already have a crystal that you're familiar with and you work with and that just pops into mind as a good soul catcher, you can both, like I said, it exists as a real thing in ordinary reality, but you can also just bring that crystal in your mind as your soul catcher. It's also 100% fine if you just imagine a crystal, and it doesn't matter whether you've seen it before or not. You can just create a soul catcher in non-ordinary reality by simply imagining a crystal. So any questions about that? Okay, so go ahead and find a comfortable position. And just take a few deep breaths again and close your eyes. Oh, sorry. I need to change the sound on my, hold on one second. I forgot. In order for you to hear the drumming, I need to change the sound setting. Sorry about that. Let's see. There we go. All right, so let me do a sound check. Can you hear that drumming? Thumbs up. Okay, good deal. So close your eyes and relax and just imagine a deep trance. Imagine and pretend that you're already in a nice, deep trance state. That's right. Just pretend it's happening and tell your subconscious mind to take you there. Notice how you feel in that deep trance state. Where do you feel it in your body? Feel heavy, light, something else? Now tell your subconscious mind to take you even deeper into a trance state. We allow your conscious mind to let go. Trust your subconscious to take you there. All your subconscious mind needs to think is, I wonder if my subconscious mind can take me into a trance state. Go, trust, and you're already there. Just relax that conscious mind and allow the process. Let the drumming guide you. Let the drumming take you deeper, deeper. Now go to that place where you meet your power animal. Place out in nature that you've already practiced, already been to. Take a moment to look around, notice the sights, sounds, smells, feel of this place. Call your power animal. When your power animal arrives, we're going to set the intention. The intention is to find out if we're holding on to someone else's soul energy. And if so, the intention is to release it. Say that intention as a statement in your mind. My intention is to find out if I'm holding on to anyone else's soul energy. Ask your power animal to tell you or show you or give you a symbol that lets you know if you are or if you are not holding on to someone else's energy. If you get a no, you're not holding on to someone else's energy. You might ask your power animal if a soul retrieval is right for you, or simply take the time to go on your own journey, set a new intention shown the lower world, the upper world, the middle world. From this point on, if you gotta know you are not holding on to anyone else's energy, just make the journey your own. Just come back when you hear the change in drum rhythm. Otherwise, if you got a yes, ask, set a new intention. Power animal, that your intention is to return that essence back to the person it belongs to. Having set that intention in your mind to your power animal, ask your power animal if there's anything you need to know, anything special about this process to know or do. When you're ready, imagine in your mind the crystal, the soul catcher, a way of transporting the soul essence that is not yours. Imagine holding it in your hand. Now imagine take all of that person's essence that's not yours. Ask your power animal to help you do this. Blow all of that essence into the crystal. Your power animal to help you blow only that person's essence into the crystal. Nothing that is yours, just theirs. Now ask your power animal to that person in the middle world. If that person has passed on, you can ask them to take you to that person in the upper world. Right there, that person, and the crystal, your guide, your power animal, ask them to blow the essence of the crystal into the person. I see them blowing it into the heart and the crown or something else. Process, your power animal's process might be different. Hand them the crystal. person know that you apologize. Didn't realize what you were doing. I'm sorry and you won't do it again. So let them know. They may notice some changes now that this essence is back. They can call in their power animal. That feels complete. Ask your power animal to return you first to that beautiful place that you meet. First meet your animal. Ask your power animal if there's a message, if there's any information, anything that you need to know about this process, about what's happened. You have released someone else's essence. Take a moment to forgive yourself. I'm taught. We're not taught how to avoid this from happens all the time. We don't have other people's bad interest in mind. We have the best interest in mind. It's usually done out of love, connection with the person. Take a moment to know that within yourself. Hold a sense of love and gratitude and appreciation for yourself for having been willing to recognize this. To go through this journey and to release that energy out of yourself. If you'd like to take a moment, if you've been doing soul, giving the soul part back, you now want to ask about soul retrieval. Go ahead and take a moment to ask your power animal benefit from the soul retrieval if that's a process that's right for you. It's time to come back. Ask your power animal to return you, reversing the process the way you came. And return back into ordinary reality. Back into the here and now. Good. How was that? If anyone, you don't have to be on the spot and talk about it if you don't want to, but you can if you like.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised by what I got from that. The person who came up for me was actually my sister, and it's not something I had, like, when you first were talking about it, some of the names popping up in my head were not like, I'm surprised that's like not really what came up. And I just got this message that I kind of am like I've held on to this sort of narrative, like a restrictive narrative of my sister that like limits our relationship and limits her and like hurts me. And so it was a really interesting insight that I'm actually going to see my sister today. So now I'm going to give her a big hug, but
will you tell her about it or not?
probably not like exactly, because she just kind of be like, what?
Yeah, some people just think it's weird.
Yeah, and part of my thing with my sister is that we're like total opposites, like polarity. And like, yeah, I don't know, it'll be interesting to kind of see what the energy feels like today.
Yeah, that's a good point too, is that sometimes this kind of work that we do can change the way other people interact with us. Even if we don't tell them anything about it, sometimes there's just a shift in the energy and the person can feel it and they respond to us differently without even knowing about any of the process. So
yeah,
That
totally.
can definitely happen.
Yeah, it's like I'm putting restrictions around her without even realizing it. So that was a really cool one. Thank you.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And so here's the reason for holding on all the way to the end. I would like to offer soul retrievals for everyone that's part of Weaving Shamanic Connections. This won't be the two-parter that I do as the hypnosis process, but just the soul retrieval on an energetic process. But like I said, I consider that something that I support on an ongoing basis. So if it looks like we need to get into some emotional work to help facilitate the integration, we certainly can do that. But otherwise, this is work that I do on my own. So in other words, I don't do it in person. I do a lot of preparation work and things on my own that I do best from home. So that's the reason why I don't do it that way. But what I do is, like I said, I do it in the middle world. I'll do the soul retrieval. I'll follow all the soul parts after we've talked about what it is how you're being affected and what kind of goals you're looking for. And I'll follow those soul parts. I'll bring them back in and blow them back into you through the middle world. And then I'll give you a recording of the process and what I saw and what I gained. A lot of times, a lot of information comes back out of it. The insights, like things that people need to do, which is part of the integration, is sometimes people need to let go of habits. They need to make changes in their own lives in order to facilitate the integration. So where often people come to soul retrieval hoping it'll just change everything for them. And it does make a big difference. Many times there's, like I said, a lot of things that people notice right away or in the days that come after a soul retrieval. But sometimes there's also work that you need to do, beliefs you need to let go of, habits you need to change, things like that in order to maintain that. So bear all of that in mind and reach out through the app, or through you can message me through Weaving Shamanic Connections through the Mighty Networks app, or online through Mighty Networks. But reach out and let me know. I don't know whether I'll be able to do this ongoing. So right now our group is relatively small, and I have the time and energy in order to support all of that. So that is my gift to you guys for being here. Down the road, I might have to post. I think I'm gonna create a topic in our posts for soul retrieval where people can ask questions about it. You can reach out on that and post if you want a soul retrieval. If you have one and you want to talk about it, all of those, that's a place for that. It's also a place that in the future, if this becomes too big for me to support doing free soul retrievals for everyone in the group, I'll post that in that topic of soul retrieval to talk about, to say that it's been cut off. So I apologize, but if that happens, if and when we get there, it's at a point where there'll be other things that you can do, and other folks that I might be able to send you to. So still reach out, and I'll be updating that as we go. So hopefully you guys will take advantage of that. It's like I said, it's a gift from the heart. And it is a process. It is something that takes um, time and energy from me. And I don't say that in a way of, I don't like, woe is me, or I'm giving you this huge gift. What I mean by saying that is that I want people to take it seriously. Sometimes when we're offered things for free, it's like, yeah, as long as it's free, whatever. But soul retrieval and soul integration is something that we need to make a little bit of a commitment to. And it's a process. And it can be extremely rewarding. People can have amazing impact in people's lives. So I say that it takes energy and effort for me in a way that I just also want you to show up with energy and effort in willingness on your behalf to put in that part that you bring to the table as well. So I thank you all for being here. And unless there's any other questions on the recording that you want, and I can also, as always, people that are on the call after we're done recording, you can ask questions in more of a private setting if you like.